Hello and welcome as Zenith Players presents Trifles by Susan Glaspell. I am TJ, I am our technical director. All of the actors you'll be hearing tonight are volunteering their time and their talents from their homes to bring a little bit of entertainment into your homes. We want to thank them all very much for joining us. We'd also like to thank our friend, Your Friendly Neighborhood Shakespeare, for hosting this on his pages. Check out his website, shakespeareapproves.com, and his Patreon, patreon.com/Shakespeare. Find out more about him at the aforementioned website, or by visiting his Facebook page, Shakespeare Approves, Your Friendly Neighborhood Shakespeare. We will have links to visit him as well as some of our other performer friends in the comments of this video. As always, we want to acknowledge and thank all of the medical professionals and essential workers who have been working tirelessly to keep us all as healthy, safe, and vaccinated as possible. If you are interested in more information about our totally volunteer organization, check out our website, zenithplayers.com. Feel very free to check out our very attractive donations page. 100% of all donations go towards production costs, which these days consist of the various subscriptions that allow for these readings to happen. If you'd like to read with us in future projects, send us an email at casting@zenithplayers.com and we will get you on board. Please relax and enjoy Steve Anderson as George Henderson, County Attorney, Steve Bonelli as Henry Peters, Sheriff, Tricia Pizzara as Mrs. Peters, Andrew Gellos as Lewis Hale, a neighboring farmer, and Mira Singer as Mrs. Hale in Trifles. Scene opens in the kitchen, now the abandoned farmhouse of John Wright. A gloomy kitchen, and left without having been put in order. Unwashed pans under the sink, a loaf of bread outside the bread box, a dish towel on the table, other signs of incompleted work. The rear, the outer door opens, the sheriff enters, followed by the county attorney and Hale. Their wives have come in slowly and stand close together near the door.
Oh, this feels good. Come up to the fire, ladies.
I'm not cold.
Now, Mr. Hale, before we move things about, you explained to Mr. Henderson just what you saw when you came here yesterday morning.
By the way, has anything been moved? Are things just as you left them yesterday?
It's just the same. When it dropped below zero last night, I thought I'd better send Frank out this morning to make a fire for us. No use getting pneumonia with a big case on, but I told him not to touch anything except the stove, and you know Frank.
Somebody should have been left here yesterday.
Oh, yesterday, when I had to send Frank to Morris Center for that man who went crazy, I want you to know I had my hands full yesterday. I knew you could get back from Omaha by today, and as long as I went over everything here myself.
Well, Mr. Hale, just tell us what happened when you came here yesterday morning.
Harry and I had started to town with a load of potatoes. We came along the road from my place, and as I got here, I said, I'm going to see if I can't get John Wright to go in with me on the party telephone. I spoke to Wright about it once before, and he put me off, saying folks talk too much anyway, and all he asked for was peace and quiet. I guess you know about how much he talked himself, but I thought maybe if I went to his house and talked about it before his wife, though I said to Harry, I don't know what about his wife wanted made much difference to John.
Let's talk about that later, Mr. Hale. I do want to talk about that, but tell now just what happened when you got to the house.
I didn't hear or see anything. I knocked at the door, and still it was all quiet inside. I knew they must be up. It was past 8 o'clock, so I knocked again, and I thought I heard somebody say, come in. Wasn't sure. I'm not sure yet, but I opened the door, this door, and there was that rocker, and sat Mrs. Wright.
What was she doing?
She was rocking back and forth, had her apron in her hand, and was kind of pleating it.
And how did she look?
Well, she looked quite queer.
How do you mean queer?
Well, as if she didn't know what she was going to do next, and kind of done up.
How did she seem to feel about your coming?
Well, I don't think she minded one way or the other. She didn't pay much attention. I said, how do, Miss Wright? It's cold, ain't it? And she said, is it? And went on kind of pleating at her apron. Well, I was surprised she didn't ask me to come up to the stove or to sit down, just sat there, not even looking at me. So I said, I want to see John. And she laughed. Well, I guess you'd call it a laugh. I thought of Harry and the team outside, so I said a little sharp, can't I see John? No, she says, kind of dull like. Ain't he home? I say, yeah, she says, he's home. Then why can't I see him? I asked her out of patience. Because he's dead, she says. Dead, I say. Uh, she just nodded her head, not getting a bit excited, but rocking back and forth. Why? Where is he? I say, not knowing what to say. She just pointed upstairs like that. I got up with the idea of going up there. I walked from there to here, and then I says, "Why? What did he die of?" Died of a rope around his neck, she says, and just went on pleating at her apron. Well, I went out and I called Harry. I thought I might need help. And we went upstairs, and he was lying.
I think I'd rather have you go into that upstairs where you can point it all out. Just go on now with the rest of the story.
Well, my first thought was to get that rope off. It looked, but Harry, he went up to him and he said, "No, he's dead all right, and we'd better not touch nothing." So we went back downstairs, and she was still sitting in that same way. "Has anybody been notified?" I asked. "No," she says, unconcerned. "Who did this, Mrs. Wright?" said Harry. He said it businesslike, and she stopped pleating her apron. "I don't know," she says. "You don't know?" says Harry. "No," she says. "Weren't you sleeping in bed with him?" says Harry. "Yes," she says, "but I was on the inside. Somebody slipped a rope around his neck and strangled him, and you didn't wake up," says Harry. "I didn't wake up," she says after him. We must have looked as if we didn't see how that could be, for after a minute she said, "I sleep sound." Harry was going to ask her more questions, but I said maybe we ought to let her tell her story first to the coroner or to the sheriff. So Harry went fast as he could to River's place, and there's a telephone.
And what did Miss Wright do when she knew that you'd gone for the coroner?
She moved from that chair to this one over here, and just sat there with her hands held together and looking down. I got a feeling that I ought to make some conversation, so I said I'd come to see if John wanted to put in a telephone, and at that she started to laugh, and then she stopped and looked at me scared. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't scared. I wouldn't like to say it was. Soon Harry got back, and then Dr. Lloyd came, and you, Mr. Peters. And so I guess that's all I know that you don't.
I guess we'll go upstairs first, and then out to the barn around there. You're convinced there was nothing important here, nothing that will point to any motive.
Nothing here but the kitchen things.
County attorney, after again looking around the kitchen, opens the door of a covered closet, gets up on a chair and looks on a shelf. He pulls his hand away, sticky.
Here's a nice mess.
Oh, her fruit, it did freeze. She was worried about that when it turned so cold. She said fire'd go out and her jaws would break.
Well, can you beat the women held for murder and worrying about her preserves?
I guess before we're through, she may have something more serious than preserves to worry about.
Well, women are used to worrying over trifles.
And yet, for all their worries, what would we do without the ladies? Dirty towels. Oh, Not much of a housekeeper, would you say, ladies?
There's a great deal of work to be done on a farm.
To be sure. And yet, I know there are some Dixon County farmhouses which do not have such towels.
Those towels get dirty awful quick. Men's hands ain't as always clean as they might be.
Loyal to your sex, I see. You and Mrs. Wright were neighbors. I suppose you were friends, too.
I've not seen much of her in late years. I've not been in this house more than a year.
And why was that? You didn't like her?
I liked her all well enough. Farmers' wives have their hands full, Mr. Henderson. And then
Yes.
it never seemed a very cheerful place.
No, it's not very cheerful. Shouldn't say she had the homemaking instinct.
Well, I don't know as Wright had either.
You mean they didn't get on very well?
No, I don't mean anything. But I don't think the place would be any cheerfuler for John Wright's being in it.
I'd like to talk more of that a little later. I want to get the lay of things upstairs now.
I suppose anything Ms. Peters does will be all right. She was to take in some clothes for, and a few little things, but we left in such a hurry yesterday.
Yes, but I would like to see what you take, Mrs. Peters. Oh, and keep an eye out for anything that might be of use to us.
Yes, Mr. Henderson.
The men exit upstairs.
I'd hate to have men coming into my kitchen, snooping around and criticizing.
Of course, it's no more than their duty.
Duty's all right, but I guess that deputy sheriff that came out to make the fire might have got a little of this on. Wish I'd thought of that sooner. Seems mean to talk about her for not having things slicked up when she had to come away in such a hurry.
She had bread set.
She was gonna put this in there. It's a shame about her fruit. Wonder if it's all gone. I think there's some here that's all right, Mrs. Peters. Yes, here. This is cherries, too. I declare I believe that's the only one. She'll feel awful bad after all her hard work in the hot weather. I remember the afternoon I put my cherries last summer.
Well, I must get those things from the front room closet. You coming with me, Mrs. Hale? You could help me carry them. My, it's cold in there.
Rat was close. I think maybe that's why she kept so much to herself. She didn't even belong to the Ladies' Aid. I suppose she felt she couldn't do her part, and then you don't enjoy things when you feel shabby. She used to wear pretty clothes and be lively when she was Minnie Foster, one of the town girls singing in the choir. But that was 30 years ago. This all you was to take in?
She said she wanted an apron. Funny thing to want, for there isn't much to get you dirty in jail, goodness knows. But I suppose just to make her feel a bit more natural. She said they was in the top drawer of this cupboard. Oh, yes, here they are. Here it is. And there that little shawl always hung behind the door. Yes, here it is.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes, Mrs. Hale.
do you think she did it?
No, I don't know.
Well, I don't think she did. Asking for an apron and her little shawl, worrying about her fruit.
Mr. Peters says it looks bad for her. Mr. Henderson is awful sarcastic in his speech. He'll make fun of her saying she didn't wake up.
Well, I guess John Wright didn't wake when they was slipping that rope under his neck.
No, it's strange. It must have been done awful crafty and still. They say it was such a funny way to kill a man, rigging it all up like that.
That's just what Mr. Hale said. There was a gun in the house. He says that's what he can't understand.
Mr. Henderson said coming out of that what was needed for the case was a motive, something to show anger, a sudden feeling.
Well, I don't see any signs of anger around here. Tables, why up to here? Wonder how they are finding things upstairs. I hope she had it a little bit more read up there. You know, it seems kind of sneaking, locking her up in town and then coming out here and trying to get her own house to turn against her.
But Mrs. Hale, the law is the law.
I suppose 'tis. Better loosen up your things, Mrs. Peters. You won't feel them when you go out.
She was piecing a quilt.
It's a log cabin pattern. Pretty, isn't it? I wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it.
The men re-enter.
I wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it.
Frank's fire didn't do much good up there, did it? Let's get out to the barn and get that cleaned up.
The men go outside.
I don't know if there's anything so strange our taking up our time with little things while we're waiting for them to get the evidence. I don't see it as anything to laugh about.
Of course, they've got awful important things on their minds.
Mrs. Peters, look at this one. Here, this is the one she was working on. And look at the sewing. All the rest has been so nice and even. And look at this. It's all over the place. Why, it looks as if she didn't know what she was about.
Oh, what are you doing, Mrs. Hale?
Just pulling out a stitch or two that's not so very good. Bad sewing always makes me fidgety.
I don't think we ought to touch things.
I'll just finish up this end. Miss Peters,
Yes, Mrs. Hale.
what do you suppose she was so nervous about?
Oh, I don't know. I just don't know why she was nervous. I'm sometimes so awful queer when I'm just tired. Well, I must get these things wrapped up. They may be through sooner than we think. I wonder where I can find a piece of paper and string.
In that cupboard, maybe.
Why, here's a bird cage. Did she have a bird, Mrs. Hale?
Why, I don't know whether she did or not. I've not been here for so long. There was a man around last year selling canaries cheap, but I don't know why she took one. Maybe she did. She used to sing real purty herself.
It's funny to think of a bird here, but she must have had one, or why would she have a cage? I wonder what happened to it.
I suppose maybe the cat got it?
No, she didn't have a cat. She got that feeling some people have about cats being afraid of them. My cat got in her room and she was real upset and asked me to take it out.
My sister Bessie was like that. Queer, ain't it?
Well, look at this door. It's broke. One hinge is pulled apart.
Looks as if someone must have been rough with it.
Why, yes.
I wish if they're gonna find any evidence they'd be about it. I don't like this place.
But I'm awful glad you came with me, Mrs. Hale. It would be lonesome for me sitting here alone.
It would, wouldn't it? But I tell you what I do wish, Mrs. Peters. I wish I had come over sometimes when she was here. I wish I had.
But of course you were awful busy, Mrs. Hale, your house and your children.
I could have come. I stayed away because it weren't cheerful. And that's why I ought to have come. I've never liked this place. Maybe because it's down in a hollow and you don't see the road. I don't know what it is, but it's a lonesome place and always was. I wish I had come over to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I can see now.
Well, you mustn't reproach yourself, Mrs. Hale. Somehow we just don't see how awful it is with other folks until something comes up.
Not having children makes less work, but it makes a quiet house. And ride out to work all day and no company when he did come in. Did you know John Wright, Mrs. Peters?
Not to know him. I've seen him in town. They say he was a good man.
Yes, good. He didn't drink and kept his word as well as most, I guess, and paid his debts. He was a hard man, Mrs. Peters, just to pass the time of day with him. Like a raw wind that gets to the bone. I should think she would have wanted a bird. But what do you suppose went with it?
I don't know, unless it got sick and died.
You weren't raised round here, were you? You didn't know her?
Not till they brought her yesterday.
Come to think of it, she was kind of like a bird herself. Real sweet and purty, but kind of timid and fluttery. How she did change. Tell you what, Mrs. Peters, why don't you take the quilt in with you? It might take up her mind.
Well, I think that's a real nice idea, Mrs. Hale. They couldn't possibly have any objection to it, could there? Now, just what would I take? I wonder if her patches are in here and her things.
Here's some bread. I expect this has got sewing things in it. What? What a pretty box. Looks like something someone would give you. Maybe your scissors are in here. What? There's something wrapped up in this piece of silk.
Why, this isn't her scissors.
Oh, Mrs. Peters,
It's the bird.
But Mrs. Peters, look at it. Its neck. Look at its neck. It's on other side too.
Somebody run its neck.
The sheriff and attorney enter.
Well, ladies, have you decided whether she was going to quilt it or knot it?
We think she was gonna knot it.
Well, that's interesting, I'm sure. Has the bird flown?
We think the cat got it.
Is there a cat?
Well, not now. They're superstitious, you know, they leave.
No sign at all of anyone coming from the outside. And their own rope. Now, let's go up again and go over it piece by piece. It would have to have been somebody who knew just them.
They go upstairs.
She liked that bird. She was going to bury it in that pretty box.
When I was a little girl, my kitten, there was a boy took a hatchet and before my eyes, and before I could get there, if they hadn't held me back, I would have hurt him.
I wonder how it would seem never to have had any children around. No, Wright wouldn't have liked that bird. Thing that sang. She used to sing. He killed that too.
We don't know who killed the bird.
I knew John Wright.
It was an awful thing done in this house that night, Mrs. Hale. Killing a man while he slept, slipping a rope around his neck that choked the life out of him.
His neck choked the life out of him.
We don't know who killed him. We don't know.
If there'd been years and years of nothing, and then a bird to sing to you, it would be awful still after the bird was still.
I know what stillness is. When we homesteaded in Dakota and my first baby died, after he was 2 years old and me with no other then.
How soon do you suppose they'll be through looking for the evidence?
No, I know what stillness is. The law's got to punish the crime, Mrs. Hale.
I wish you'd seen Minnie Foster when she wore a white dress with blue ribbons and stood up there in the choir and sang. Oh, I wish I'd come over here once in a while. That was a crime. That was a crime. Who's gonna punish that?
We mustn't take on.
I might have known she needed help. I know how things can be for women. I tell you, it's queer, Mrs. Peters. We live close together and we live far apart. We all go through the same things. It's all just a different kind of the same thing. If I was you, I wouldn't tell her fruit was gone. Tell her it ain't. Tell her it's all right. Take this in to prove it to her. She may never know whether it was broke or not.
Ma, it's a good thing the men couldn't hear us. Wouldn't they just laugh, getting all stirred up over a little thing like a dead canary? As if it could have anything to do with... Wouldn't they laugh?
Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't.
No, Peters, is all perfectly clear except a reason for doing it. And you know juries when it comes to women. If there was some definite thing, something to show, something to make a story about, a thing that would connect up with this strange way of doing it.
Well, I got the team around. Pretty cold out there.
I'm going to stay here a while by myself. You can send Frank out for me, can't you? I want to go over everything. I am not satisfied that we can't do better.
Do you want to see what Mrs. Peters is going to take in?
Oh, I guess they're not very dangerous things the ladies have picked out. No, Mrs. Peters doesn't need supervising. For that matter, a sheriff's wife is married to the law. Ever think of it that way, Mrs. Peters?
Not just that way.
Married to the law. I just want you to come in here a minute, George. We ought to take a look at these windows.
Oh, windows.
We'll be right out, Mr. Hale.
Hale goes outside. Sheriff follows the attorney into the other room. Mrs. Hale rises, hands tight together, looking intensely at Mrs. Peters, whose eyes make a slow turn, finally meeting Mrs. Hale's. A moment, Mrs. Hale holds her, and her own eyes point the way to where the box is concealed. Suddenly, Mrs. Peters throws back quilt pieces and tries to put the box in the bag she's wearing. It's too big. She opens the box, starts to take the bird out, but can't touch it. The sound of a knob turning in the other room as Mrs. Hale snatches the box and puts it in the pocket of her big coat. Enter the attorney and sheriff.
Well, Henry, at least we found out that she was not going to quilt it. She was going to... What is it you call it, ladies?
We call it Not It, Mr. Henderson.
End of play. Thank you for joining us for Trifles. A big thanks to our friend, your friendly neighborhood Shakespeare. Visit his website, shakespeareapproves.com, or on Facebook, Shakespeare Approves, your friendly neighborhood Shakespeare. Got links to all his content and more in the comments of this video. Also like to thank all of the actors who volunteered to read with us tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. If you've enjoyed this reading, all of our past readings are available on our Facebook page, a little better organized on our website, zenithplayers.com. If you want more information on us, including how to be involved in a reading like this one, head to our Facebook page, Zenith Players, and send us a message, or send an email to casting@zenithplayers.com, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. We want to continue to express our support to everyone out there working to keep us healthy and safe and vaccinated. We are off next Saturday. We'll be back soon with plenty more live stream readings for you to enjoy. Thank you.